Hey, welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us for the Nourish Your True Self Q&A and conversation for Eating Disorder Awareness Month. So thanks for all the participants that are joining us live here tonight. And if you're tuning in on our social media, well, it's because you couldn't make the live night and we uploaded it onto our social medias and YouTube. So thanks for watching that as well. And so I'm Jenny Lee, the social work half of this duo, and Angie here is going to tell you all about Nourish Your True Self. She's the dietitian half. She's going to tell us tell you about who we are, why you're here with us tonight.
And why you're here with us. So I do welcome anybody who hasn't had a chance to see any of our videos before, and welcome back the folks who have seen an Angie and Jenny Lee show before and are back for more. We have, as Nourish Your True Self, we have been a business for 3 years. We just celebrated our 3rd birthday. Yeah, it's been fast and furious and totally wonderful. We opened up just a month, I guess, before we all experienced COVID and everything that came with that. So we quickly moved to virtual, and we offer disordered eating services and supports for people. The main focus of our business really focuses in on supporting people for disordered eating, including both the dietitian and the social worker. And I was going to say oftentimes, but now that we've kind of adjusted and evolved in what we do in practice, everybody gets a chance to meet with both of us at the same time, because we really do believe that catches a lot of stuff, and we are able to offer a lot more and fill in a lot more gaps in that way. We also have expanded in the last year and have brought on other therapists. Jennifer and Melanie and Janine have joined us, and they see people for a large range of other things, not necessarily disordered eating. So that's kind of a nutshell of what we do. Jenny Lee, is there anything that I might have missed that you want to make sure we talk about? Or
I think I would likely just kind of use some keywords that you and I, so our social work therapists that have joined us do kind of the whole self-health outside of disordered eating and eating disorders. And the work that we do is a very team-based treatment approach to disordered eating and eating disorders, which means dietitian and social work mental health therapy together, and that it's quite individualized. So if we say we see 10 people in a week, each person will tell you that our approach and their plans and their therapeutic process with us looks very different. And so some people need supported snack times on video. Some people can just appreciate it over the phone. Some people don't need that at all. Some people need one-on-one with me or one-on-one with Angie, or they need to meet with us together. We're always doing quirky things. You never know if we're going to do some talk therapy or writing, or introduce, I have a certified yoga teacher bringing some movement to the practice, and that we have a lot of combined years of working in eating disorders, which I think is important. Someone asked me the other day, these people that get in saying they're eating disorder experts, like how do they get to call themselves that? So lots of experience with that. Angie, maybe you could share some of the specialized certifications that you have and that we're actually working on right now.
Yeah, so I have been, I'm looking at my certificate now so I get the words right, because it's a big long handle. I'm a certified intuitive eating counselor, and we're working right now on being, both Jenny Lee and I are working on right now being body trust therapists, which is really exciting, and we can certainly talk more about that. I have over 20 years experience specifically with eating disorders in a lot of different settings. So, when I started as an intern, my thesis was on the dietitian's role in eating disorder recovery. And I was just realizing I totally threw that away. I don't even know where it went. It would be out of date and not terribly useful, but I was nostalgic the other day and wondered what I even wrote, and it's gone. And then I started, building a program, Simcoe County Eating Disorder Program. I helped my 2 colleagues, Lisa and Lynn, and as a team of 3, we built that program. So I was the inpatient dietitian for eating disorders. I was an outpatient dietitian. I was, a group lead for both clients with disordered eating, teens with disordered eating primarily, and their parents as well. And then I kind of graduated and did community work. So I would see people one-on-one. I would do, Jenny Lee and I did a couple of groups, peer support groups, and those kinds of things to make sure that people had access to lots of different supports. So I've kind of got a nice umbrella. And I guess at the end of the day, there is no stamp that you get that says, yes, expert, right on your forehead. But given all of the experiences that we've had, I feel like that has been my specialization for a very long time.
Well, and one of the other trainings we did, Angie, is because these are more familiar to people, we did CBTE, so cognitive behavior therapy for eating disorders, and also some specific work around exposure therapy specific to weight and scales. And so we've done pieces of that. And we call our work whole self health, even though we focus a lot on disordered eating and eating disorders. Our hope with people through this process and is that we help people discover and live their most authentic selves. And that really is something that we strive for as a team. And I know I can speak on behalf of the other therapists that work for us that also is their goal as well. And and I will say too, because some people don't know that the other piece of experience I bring to the table is my own lived experience with I call us eating disorder recovery warriors. And so I have experience as a recovery warrior and also bring that to the table. And so a little bit about us for those who don't know, and for those who already knew that, thanks for sitting through it. And you're going to be experts on us too. And so we thought tonight, for those who are live with us, we're going to just run through some general information around eating disorders and disordered eating. And then those who are with us, you're going to really drive the conversation if we want to steer it in another direction. If there's questions that come up as I share a little bit, we're going to share using our social media posts today. But if there's questions that come up as we're sharing that information, please just raise your hand if you're comfortable asking the question out loud, or share it in the chat. Angie's going to keep an eye because I'm going to share my screen. So you've got something lovely to look at while we share this information with you. But for sure, and I'm not going to read everything on these screens. It's just going to be a tool for us to start the conversation. Yeah, start the conversation. And so today we actually shared online some information about what's the difference between an eating disorder and disordered eating, because we call our business services for disordered eating, really. Eating disorders are defined as a pattern or a habit of inconsistent eating patterns or disturbances in eating patterns. The thing is, though, they are diagnosed. So in the DSM-5, it's a big book of lists and how you're diagnosed with typically mental health, mental illness diagnoses, and you can be diagnosed. The biggest difference is for disordered eating, and I'll show you here. It refers to food and diet related behaviors that don't meet that diagnostic criteria, the DSM-5, but can still negatively affect someone's physical, mental, or emotional health, what Angie and I call whole self health. And so the biggest difference is one is diagnosable and really well known and talked about. The other is I'm having food and diet related behaviors that don't meet diagnostic criteria. We also use disordered eating so that people knew you can self-diagnose. And if you have a strange, awkward, dysfunctional, messed up, whatever word you want to use, relationship with food, your body, movement, the scale, these are all things that would fit under disordered eating. And so we really wanted to keep it quite general so that people knew you don't have to be diagnosed with a traditional eating disorder to be struggling with disordered eating. Angie, got anything to add there?
I think the only thing I would add is the reason we did that was to include folks that feel like they don't fit, but clearly their struggles are making it difficult to kind of do life Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
a lot of times, if you don't hit all those checky boxes, you don't get any kind of diagnosis. And oftentimes that means treatment isn't available because you don't meet all the diagnostic criteria. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're struggling less, or that it's less worrisome or less severe. And so that was the biggest reason that we wanted all of that stuff to still be recognized, known, and able to get support for.
And what I'm learning from, this year especially, we've got a lot of requests to do posts on social media groups, informing people about eating disorders and disordered eating. And one of the things that we're recognizing is that, well, we knew, but I think people are discovering that disordered eating is quite rampant throughout our society. And if you follow us or know much about us, and who knows, maybe we'll get into it a little bit tonight, but about how diet culture, we've been talking a lot about this on our social medias, how diet culture influences how we see our body, feel about our body and food and our weight. And for anybody that isn't unclear, when I say diet culture, what does that mean? It's the culture that we see everywhere in advertisements, on our social media, the messages that are given to us around food, our bodies, our shapes of our bodies, how we move our bodies, is diet culture. Angie, do you have a better definition for diet culture? I feel like I totally missed the mark and I can own that. Did you, can you, Angie, try to define diet culture for us? How would you define it?
I would say that the dominant culture that hyper focuses on people's bodies and eating habits as the most important thing about themselves, as the most defining feature, and really does then attribute good and bad and worthiness and usefulness to bodies, which misses a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Shifting gears a little, we wanted to just overview eating disorders and disordered eating, some of the most common we see. And again, I'm not going to go into these. Some of them are quite known. And if there's questions here in the group, for sure ask. But one quite familiar one is anorexia, sometimes known as ANA, characterized by restricting food, whereas bulimia is often about secret bouts of overeating, followed by some self-induced purging, whether that's vomiting or over-exercising, strict dieting. Both of these have excessive concerns with body weight. Binge eating disorder is an interesting one, not always treated in the medical world of treatment programs, but current
and only recently recognized in the DSM-5.
Yes, that was a recent addition, wasn't it? And that one's
here. That's all.
Oh, I know, and you froze too, Angie. I think we're back now. I sometimes, I'm just going to say this in the middle of our chat. I know it's strange, but sometimes I wonder if the time of day and the internet matters. I don't know if any in the chat feels like that, but if you get on at a busy time of the night when lots of people are on the internet, I feel like it's 2023 and they probably should have worked it out by now, but it looks as though we might be running into some tech issues, but we're just
high usage time.
Yeah, that's what I think. Sometimes I feel like that. But binge eating disorder, recently added to the DSM-5, is recurrent episodes of eating large amounts of food, but not, it's missing the compensating for the eating. So whereas bulimia often has the overeating followed by a purging behavior, binge eating disorder, it doesn't have that piece. It's the recurrent episode of eating large amounts of food. Another one that we, oh, go ahead, Angie.
I wonder if I can just add the thing that I think is missing in some of these diagnoses, and is often a big kind of light bulb moment for our clients. Each and every one of those 3 diagnoses is a restrictive eating pattern. It has a restrictive piece to it. And that is often missed, especially with bulimia and binge eating disorder. People aren't as focused on that because it is less noticeable. A lot of people walking around who are struggling with bulimia and binge eating disorder live in very normal bodies or bigger bodies. So it's not the typical in the movies kind of sensationalized idea of what an eating disorder looks like for a lot of people. So it will often go misdiagnosed, and the idea that it's a restrictive eating pattern at its core with all these other things added gets missed.
Yeah. Thanks, Angie. We will sometimes see people with pica. And so pica is the urge to consume things that are inedible, aren't actually foods. And another one that we are seeing more and more often is ARFID. And so it's an avoidant restrictive eating disorder. And this is it's a restricting around foods or the amount of food, but it's not so much based in worries about our body image, our size, or our shape, but it can be due to a few things. There can be sensory issues. There can just be a lack of interest in certain foods, or there can be a fear of the consequences of a food. And so an example that we gave online today is like, the last time I ate chicken fingers, I got really sick. And now I'm worried that I'll get sick again every time I eat chicken fingers. And so I avoid them, or I restrict certain things because I'm worried about the consequence of them. And I'll mention the sensory one too, because that's often a common one that we've had up to. And it's really fun to watch Angie and a client do this process, because they do what's called food chaining often. And so picking a food that's tolerable, and then picking a food of like, what is a food that you really want to try or want to like, and deciding how can we chain it to get to a place where it feels comfortable. And so Angie, can you describe this process? Because it is one that's super fun to watch over several sessions.
You just did. That was a lovely little description, but it is part of the treatment plan, especially when people with ARFID want to expand their variety, but they're terrified to do so because they've either had very negative experiences in the past, or they've just got this block where their brain doesn't allow them to think about what that might look like, and it's not scary. So we kind of work backwards from where we want to be to where we are, and then try to pick different foods that are increasing variety and different than the one that I tolerate and like, but very similar. So it's not a leap towards something that's very different in texture, very different in taste, very different in temperature even. You know, when we're eating, all 5 of our senses are involved. So it can be very overwhelming for someone with any kind of sensory difficulties, or just really very sensitive sensory issues, right? So being able to, for example, you know, I want to expand the different kinds of fruit that I like. I really only tolerate apples right now. I want to get to be able to try a mango. I've never tried a mango. People talk about it a lot. I wouldn't jump to mango because it's very, very different in terms of texture, in terms of taste, in terms of sight. Like, all of the sensory things about those two things are different. So we might shift to a different colored apple or a different textured apple, and then we might shift to a hard pear because it's an apple. We've just changed it a little bit, and if it's hard, it has a similar texture but a different flavor. So we start chaining in a way that increases somebody's confidence with trying new things, because it's not wildly scary and wildly different, just different enough that we're exposing them to different things without turning that off. It's really, you can tell I got going a little bit fast and a little bit loud. It's really exciting to do with people. That's one of the things I really do like.
Yeah,
and I do it a lot with younger people, a lot of younger people who have sensory issues or on the spectrum, or who have other adverse reactions to food because of other health things that have come up or illnesses that have come up. It can be really exciting to do that with a kid or a teen with their parents, and trying these new things, especially when they want to, they just don't know how, and they have places they want to go. They want to be able to go to a party with their friends, but they want to feel confident that they aren't going to be terrified of the food that's there. So it's a slow process, but it is exciting. I do like it.
Yeah, thank you. It is super cool. I love to watch it. And then the last category we put online today was just the other disordered eating. So any symptoms that could be involved with an official diagnosis and or not. And so we talk about restrictive food rules or habits, over exercise, extreme guilt for not exercising or missing a workout, overly concerned with your body, fixated on your weight or using the scale, disordered body image, avoiding eating in public. And that's just to name a few. And so habits around food, your body, movement, weight, the scale that interrupt how you live your day-to-day life would be disordered eating symptoms.
I will also add, there's one on there that you might have passed.
Yeah.
But I can't, with all the things up on my screen, I can't see them all. There's one that a lot of people don't know. It is, well, I want to say it's new, but I remember 20 years ago we were talking about it. It's not in the DSM-5 yet, but orthorexia is something.
Oh, it was coming.
Yeah. Oh, you were already on that track?
Well, it's in another slide, but you can talk about it.
Is it okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because it's one that hyper focuses on the idea that I'm controlling my health with what I put in my body in terms of food, and the extreme focus on health, which makes it harder to identify for some people as an eating disorder, because it seems like they're just a really healthy person and they're really health conscious, right? But it becomes it becomes difficult to carry on kind of normal life stuff, because people become terrified of having one bite of one kind of food and that becoming, well, now I'm going to get cancer, or I'm going to be so unhealthy because I've had one meal that's a little bit different than what I'm used to. So it really does change quality of life for people, and that's where we're looking at the whole self-health, that the hyper vigilance and the hyper focus on those things are out of whack. Mm-hmm. And that's what makes it disordered.
Yeah, and so, oops, that's not the one I wanted to show you.
Was that totally going to be the next slide, and I was just jumping the gun?
Yeah, of course it was.
I guess we're on the same page.
Totally. And so I broke it down. And so I wasn't going to go through all of these again, but you can hop on our social medias and see them if you're interested. We've got night eating disorder, purging disorder, and other specified feeding, or not otherwise specified. We see in the DSM-5, you don't tick enough boxes, but you tick enough of some of them that they might diagnose you as not otherwise specified. But then one of the ones that we did talk about, orthorexia, an unhealthy focus on eating in a healthy way. So eating nutritious food is good, but if you have orthorexia, you obsess about it to a degree that can damage your overall well-being. And I put a note here, this is where diet culture messaging is a huge contributor to the existence of orthorexia. This idea about, oh, I'm going to try a workout routine, and if I don't do it for 5 days in a row, I've failed it. Or, oh, I'm doing a diet, and so I can't have the cake at the birthday, or else everything's written off. And knowing that that healthy piece comes with some balance of things that taste delicious and feel good in your body. And orthorexia really steals our ability to trust that we know what our body wants and likes and needs. And
to exercise the flexibility that requires the human existence. Like you have to remain flexible to be able to fully participate.
Yeah. And the other one I wanted to mention on the screen was one that we often see as body dysmorphia disorder. So that's this obsessive idea that there's some part of our body or appearance that's severely flawed. And we'll often see people go through all types of measures to hide that body part or fix that body part. Some people might notice people obsessively checking themselves in the mirror, or checking their bodies is one thing that we see in people that we try and heal them from. And so in extreme cases, we see people checking their wrist sizes, or, their worth is really determined on if their rings get tight on their hands or not. And this hyper focus on our body, and if it changes, what that means for our worth and our whole self-health. One that I'm not sure, I thought I had it on here somewhere, but one that I wanted to mention too, Angie, was diabulimia, because I'm seeing a lot more about this and people asking more about diabulimia. Can you tell us briefly about that?
Yeah, so that is when somebody has a diagnosis of diabetes, an eating disorder that kind of creeps in and gangs up on that person with their treatment focused diabetes, and it is really manipulating. The diagnosis is when someone is manipulating their treatment, insulin use, medication use, their eating, all of those kinds of things, for the same reasons that somebody with anorexia would be changing their eating and restricting, right? It really big worries about body, really big worries about health.
Yeah.
But the negative consequences that come from those medication manipulations aren't as high on the list and can be very, very dangerous.
Yeah. And then shifting gears once again, we thought it was just important to talk about some of the contributing factors to eating disorders. And so we're not going to cover them all, but there's a few that we covered online today that we feel like they don't get really talked about that often. We know that there's a social cultural piece, and you've heard us talking about diet culture tonight. And so this is the pressure put on people of any sex or gender about an ideal, quote unquote, ideal body. And so this is influenced by diet culture and fat bias or weight bias in our culture. And this type of messaging we've said is rampant throughout our society. And so knowing that there's a social and cultural aspect around pressures around our body and what it means to be beautiful or handsome or successful and happy. And so that definitely is a contributor. And know that as we go through, there's not one that blankets everybody, or these might be contributors for some and might not at all. And this definitely doesn't cover all of them, just a few ideas. A few of them. One of the other ones is food insecurity. And so we know that people who don't have regular access to food often will engage in more binge eating, overeating, nighttime eating, purging, compensating behaviors. We know that when food insecurity is an issue, that there is an increased risk of developing disordered eating symptoms.
And that's true for a history of food insecurity. So if I grew up in a household that experienced food insecurity, I might not necessarily be experiencing that now, but it absolutely has shifted my relationship with food, and it still carries on, and it can be very disordered.
Yes. And then the last one I wanted to mention was trauma. And so often eating disorders are rooted in power and control. And so people come with all types of traumas, and I call them little T's and big T's. And what I mean by that is sometimes people say, oh, Jenny Lee, like I haven't gone through trauma. And I say, well, have you ever moved? Were you ever bullied? Were these things? So I call those the little T's that people, when I say trauma, lots of times people go to these big things that we see in the movies, sexual abuse and big violent traumas. And those are the big T's. I say we can't forget the little T's. And so when we feel out of control and powerless, sometimes what happens is our brain says, I know how you control, I know what you can control, and I can control what I put in my mouth or what I don't, and how I move my body. And so just a few that we wanted to mention, but again, you can hop on our social media to see where we talk about more. And as always, if you hop on our social media and you see things that you have questions about, don't hesitate to leave us comments or drop us a message or send us an email, because we're happy to respond with answers. We do try and reply to comments that are put out for us. And then the last part, I took the screen down because we don't need it, but the last part we wanted to touch on is treatment for eating disorders. And so there was 4 things we mentioned online for treatment. Angie and I, many treatment programs do believe in this, a mixture of therapy via psychotherapist, social worker, that's myself, and a mixture of nutrition therapy with a dietitian. And so those two are separate sometimes, but together in our world here at Nourish Your True Self, it's very important. Again, that team-based approach for people. Other treatment can include groups and family therapy. We don't currently offer any groups. It's not that we don't want to. There just hasn't been the need at this point. Like Angie mentioned years ago, though, we were part of running a peer support. So that was for people struggling with eating disorders. I was a peer in that group and Angie was our leader. So we have done groups in the past where there's the need and the number of people, and family therapy is offered to our folks as needed, because we also believe that you can't heal in isolation, that if you're young and you live at home with your parents, we need them involved in the program. Even if you're a young adult or an adult living at home, it's important that people are a part of your treatment plan so that they can support you. And because we know that you can't do this work alone. It's really, really hard. And the last two are medication. We can't diagnose and we can't prescribe, but we can definitely, or we are definitely agreeable that medication can complement this for some people. Let's say, example, extreme anxiety. Sometimes it's really hard to use your tools if you're living, say, your anxiety is at a 10 out of 10 really big. Even an 8 out of 10, a 7 out of 10, when it's like that all the time, it can be really hard to learn and use tools. And so sometimes medication can be used to complement that, turn the volume down of the anxiety so you can use your tools, try on these new tools and see what works for you. And then the last one is sometimes hospitalization and inpatient programs are needed. This recovery process is hard. And I can tell you based on personal experience, I did a lot of my healing in community with several therapists. And in the end, I couldn't do it alone. I needed to go to a program where I could be isolated and just focus on my recovery goals. And so sometimes that happens for people. Angie and I love that we're able to provide a treatment program in community, but we also recognize that there is a place for the medical model in hospitalization sometimes. So all of those pieces together are part of our treatment plans, and alongside the things that we described in the beginning about what got us into this work and why we can be seen as experts in the eating disorder and disordered eating community. And so I wonder if there's any questions from any of the participants in the group that's with us. We have lots more we can tell you about, but if there's questions from people here, we'd love to hear from you, whether it's in the chat or by raising your hand, so we can focus it on you.
And what you want to know.
Mm-hmm.
Because we can talk all night long if you want.
Well, because here's the thing, probably what you want to know is what other people want to know, and those who couldn't be here tonight. And so is it you want to know more about diet culture? Is it what the heck was that intuitive eating that you talked about, Angie? Is it that, oh, I heard about Noom and I want to know, they're saying it's not a diet, is it? Maybe there was something we mentioned earlier in the conversation that you're curious about. Maybe you want to ask for a friend. This has been going on and I wonder if this is something to be concerned about. I had someone reach out the other day worried about their grandkid being a picky eater and wondering if that was something they needed to be worried about. And so maybe there's just some of those things on anyone's mind that have joined us here tonight that might be helpful in your personal or professional lives.
Pretty quiet on the chat.
Yeah. So Angie, I wonder, when I've been posting on social media about these things, I wonder if we talk a little bit about diet culture.
Oh, sure.
What do you think? What do you think?
I think that's reasonable, because I think the biggest thing people are shocked at when we even use the term diet culture, you don't notice because it's everywhere, right? It's like the fish who doesn't notice the water they're swimming in. We were all born in this world, this culture since we were born, since all of us in this room were born, has been focused on weight equals health. And diet is the way to control weight, right? So just having that as the foundation of the world that we've been socialized in makes it difficult sometimes to identify what diet culture even is. And sometimes it's true, diet culture is not necessarily harming everyone. Not every diet turns into a disordered eating or eating disorder, but every eating disorder started at a diet.
Yeah.
So I think it's at least important to identify it and be able to think differently about it.
Yeah. And so some examples of diet culture are labeling foods, good and bad.
Yep.
We at Nourish You True Self say food is food. But we very quickly, I'm sure those here with us tonight and those watching later on the recording, you can probably think of times that you've heard good or bad foods, or maybe even identified them in yourself. Who's shocked to know that that's diet culture? Diet culture is what also teaches us to associate our worth with what we eat and how we eat.
And what our bodies look like.
And what our bodies look like. And yeah, to one of our folks here, keto is everywhere. And what do you think? And so, so I'm going to say this, and it's going to link it, and I'm going to let Angie answer that question we got in the chat, because the other piece that diet culture teaches us to ignore our body cues and ignore our hunger cues and our movement cues. And so if I'm achy, but I'm like, I said I was going to the gym 3 to 5 times this week, and it's Friday, but I got a headache, and I ignore my headache and my achy body, and I go to the gym anyways because I committed to a certain number of days a week. Diet culture influenced. And then the same if we're ignoring our hunger and our hunger cues, which Angie, I'm sure you could say keto and others teach us about ignoring our body cues. But the question was, keto is everywhere. What do you think about it?
Well, there's a lot of things I think about it.
In a nutshell.
I'm shocked that it's everywhere. I'm shocked that it's lasted this long, quite frankly. And it really is very restrictive. It also, the original kind of keto diet, where it came from, has been what I'd like to call Pinterested into a, you can always have bacon, and doesn't everybody want to eat in that way? But the idea that we're trying to force ketoacidosis, which is the body's backup safety system for starvation, so that we burn primarily fat because we're eating more fat, is flawed fundamentally because of those words that I just said. When my body is in ketoacidosis, it is under extreme stress and trying to bring out all of the safety features to make sure that I can function and can continue to survive. So it can be very, very harmful. Luckily, most people are unable to do it for a very, very long time, or they have stints of it, and then they have days where they feel like they fell off the wagon. Oh, I can't believe I did that. I ate a bunch of carbs. What am I doing? Something's wrong with me. Nothing's wrong with you. That's your normal biological urge to make sure you're getting the fuel that your brain needs, because your brain can't use fat for fuel. Mm-hmm. But that's the external cues that you were talking about, Jenny Lee. We think something's wrong with us because we're not able to follow these rules. And the rules don't come from what my body actually needs. Yeah. So it can be very, very harmful. When I worked in hospital, right, I saw people in the extreme cases hospitalized because of it.
Thanks for that question. I just want to share a few more examples of diet culture, extreme food rules, anxiety around food, avoiding food because they're high in fat or carbs or calories, or just avoiding a food for a certain reason. Exercise as punishment, right? Like I made this rule for myself about how many times I have to go to the gym or I have to exercise. And if I don't do that, there's something wrong with me, or I should be able to do that, or some other examples of diet culture and how invasive it is. And
I think that the shift there is, it can be so harmful because if I'm not listening to my internal cues, I have a headache, my body is sore, I feel run down, I feel like I'm coming down with something, I force myself to go to the gym anyway because I must, that is the rule that I made. It does increase the likelihood of injury. It does increase the likelihood of being run down and unable to fight off anything, right? Because your body's using these extra pieces of energy for this workout, when the run down feeling was it giving you a message, hey, I'm fighting something off and I need the extra energy. Can you rest? I'm using my immune system. And we often don't know that until we start losing the battle and we get symptoms of illness, and then we are able to take a break. And sometimes I'll tell you, when it gets really messed up, people are sick as a dog and still on the treadmill because they must, right? That I must follow the rules or else I'm not being healthy or I'm not being good. That's the part where it's out of whack and out of balance and not really focused on whole self-health.
Yeah, I'm going to give a couple more examples. And Angie, I want you to give the nutshell of about how we feel about intermittent fasting. It's in the chat. And so I'm just going to give a couple more examples of diet culture, though, because I find people don't really, when we use that term, they don't know the vastness of it and what it means. And so when we compliment people on weight loss, the world that teaches us it's okay to talk about people's bodies and compliment weight loss is diet culture, which often results in people equating thinness to health or their body to their worth.
Yep.
Folks who avoid social situations because of food, diet culture, disordered eating, believing you must take supplements for health, diet culture. And the last one, feeling you need to justify your eating, or I wonder if anybody has experienced the scale dictating your happiness for the day or how worthy you feel. So some other examples of diet culture, so we can just kind of get out there the vastness of what we mean when we mean diet culture. Okay, Angie, nutshell, intermittent fasting.
I don't like these nutshell questions, I'll tell you.
I
feel like I'm on a clock. So very, very similar, like external rules about when you can and can't eat is really not honoring the fact that your body knows when it's hungry. And we start to experience our bodies not giving us those messages appropriately because we're not listening to them, right? And then wondering, what's wrong with me? I shouldn't be hungry. I've had what I'm supposed to eat at the time I'm supposed to eat it. Well, is it enough? Was it at the time that your body wants to eat it? Everybody has a time of day where they're more interested in food and have more of an appetite, and then another time of day where they're really not. And the intermittent fasting
puts everyone in the same box.
Yeah, it pigeonholes people. And I mean, some of them that you see there, some of them are really wacky, right? I saw one where it was the animal that you're most likely to be like. So it's a human body with a dolphin head, and this is the time of day I'm supposed to eat. That is a little bit more easy to see the red flags and whistles, because that is a little bit wacky. But the idea that I have to control the timing because my body can't help me do that and is doing something wrong. The idea that I'm in control of how and when my body is digesting food, like I get it. I totally understand the reasons people think these things and worry about these things, but 100% of your digestion is not, you don't get to choose what is happening. You're not involved, right? That's an automatic process. Now, the fact that I'm not eating for 15 hours or 20 hours is certainly adjusting when I'm able to digest something. But the idea that I'm going for that long, I mean, human gas tanks, I do often equate machines and cars, just to give I do a lot of analogies. I love an analogy, right? Our gas tank is not very big. So we can't actually fill it up enough to go for 20 hours without needing backup systems. And my backup systems turn on automatically. And if I overuse those backup systems, stress hormones are released, and then other backup systems are used. So the idea that that's positively influencing health really is the opposite of what I see. Because if my body has to make its own sugar to feed my brain because I'm not eating enough on a daily basis, something's off, and the stress hormones that are being released for that to happen are causing problems.
One of the things that I like to use is like polyvagal theory in my work to bring in our nervous systems and our amygdala and our vagus nerve and all of this stuff. But one of my favorite things when I'm talking to people about their bodies, their nervous system and their brains, you know, if they just spent as much time teaching us this in high school health class, what a different world it would be to realize like my brain is always creating stories and attaching stories to things, but our bodies don't speak English. right? Whatever your languages you speak, it doesn't speak English. Your body and nervous system speaks touch, movement, breath, those types of things. And so when we try and dictate when we're hungry, our body doesn't get it because it doesn't speak English. It doesn't know intermittent fasting. And it says, what the heck? Like your brain says, well, you can't eat after 7. And all your body knows is like, well, my stomach is growling and I want you to feed me. It doesn't know what time it is. And so we learn to think with our brains so much that we lose the ability to listen to our bodies. And actually, the most dangerous thing about diet culture is it teaches us to not trust ourselves and our bodies. Don't listen to your body. You're not hungry at 8 p.m. Don't listen to your body. You got plantar fasciitis, walk it off, right? Diet culture teaches us not to listen, but our nervous system, our bodies are like, hey man, just listen. And then give me breath. Give me movement, give me touch, those things. And so one of the biggest things that I love to bring into this stuff is Angie can do all the stuff that she just told you. She can tell you the bio and all of that stuff about diet culture. And then I bring it in and I say, okay, now all the stuff you learned up here from Angie, let's learn how we connect it to your body. And so how can you start listening to both? Because diet culture really teaches us to not trust ourselves and what our body is saying to us, which is so berserk. I don't know about you listening to that, but as I say it, every time I say it, I go, that is so messed up.
And it's so disconnected, right? This is us trying to reconnect because they are connected. They have been. We could do it as infants. We all did it. It's there. It's just the way we were taught to not trust it, and our brains know better.
Yeah. And so a really great question in the chat. I think we'll take this, and there were some logistical questions about accessing us. So I think we can cover these two. It'll take us a little over an hour. So if anyone has to geek out, we won't be offended by it. But one of the questions is, how do I talk to, this question is specifically, how do I talk to a teen if I'm worried about them without feeling alienated? But I wonder if it's just generally, how do I talk to someone I'm worried about without them feeling alienated? Considering Angie and I have said a few times about talking about bodies and each other's bodies, we've been taught that that's okay. And so it is a bit of a slippery slope. Angie, do you want to start off with some hot tips about how to approach someone that you're worried about?
Yes. I'd like to start, just because in true Angie fashion, I want to start with the few things that you don't want to do. You don't want to have this conversation while you're eating. You don't want to have this conversation by saying, hey, I noticed what's on your plate and what you're eating right now.
We're not
right. The timing here really matters. So kind of a very neutral time. And I think really making it about things that you notice and things that are about you, not about the person that you are concerned about, right? I'm noticing this and I'm worried about you. And sometimes that's all you can say. Sometimes that's it. There are more. But oftentimes it's, I'm noticing, I see it quite frequently. I don't know if you notice, I'm worried because. That's a really nice place to start for a teenager or a grown-up.
Yeah. And so I will often say, professionally and personally in my journey, when people would say to me, I feel worried, as angry as I might have got, I could never take away their feeling. And so I think that's so important. We share that with people. It's really, I'm noticing, I feel worried, or I feel worried that I've seen this, or do you notice this? Because I feel worried and I just want to talk about it. Is there anything going on, or do I not need to worry about it? I think one of the biggest things is, I feel worried. I love you. I feel worried. I notice this. I feel concerned. Can we talk about this in a non-attacking, safe way, not over a meal? Sometimes people will say to me, I've had the conversation in the car, or going on a walk, getting the mail or taking the dog out for a walk. We know that being in cars, not making eye contact, can make these conversations easier. And we also know that moving your body while having these conversations, like walking to the mailbox or walking to your dog, also allows you to process these types of conversations in a different way than kind of sitting at the table and having them. So I would say those are some quick tips, creative ways to have the conversations. And really, I notice and I feel worried about you. Can we talk about it?
And there's some really good resources at the NEDIC website. That's the National Eating Disorders Information Center for Canada. That's usually where I point people first, because they have a drop-down box for resources specifically for I know somebody or I'm worried about a family member or a friend.
And that would be NEDIC, NEDIC.ca. Tons of really good resources for professionals who work in the field, for parents, supporters, friends that are just looking for general information or how to talk or what not to say. A really great site that we send lots of people to for great resources. Amazing. And so I think unless another question pops up, I'm going to move to the logistic questions before we head out for the night. And so we had a question about how do you access us at Nourish Your True Self? How are we covered? All of that jazz. So we're 100% self-referral. And so whether you hop onto our website at nourishyourtrueself.ca or you email one of us, you find our emails, or you text or call Angie and I, all of our information is on Facebook, Instagram. It's probably on YouTube, for sure on our website. And you can contact us in any way to talk about whether our services are right for you. If you're curious about if we can help or support you, we do short 10 to 15 minute free consults for people. And then if you determine that we're a good fit for you, we're covered by health benefits. So if you have coverage for a registered dietitian or registered masters of social work or psychotherapist, you may have coverage for either of us. And then we do offer an equity scale, which is a bit different than a sliding scale. Some people are familiar with the sliding scale. If you can't afford the full price, we'll slide it to what fits for you. We actually offer equity pricing. And what that means is anybody who is part of a marginalized community, whether that's based on race, sexual identity, ability or disability, any of those things, you automatically self-identified, automatically land at our equity pricing. And so those who don't fall into marginalized, sliding scale, if you marginalize, self-identified, automatic equity, but within the equity, we also offer a sliding scale as well. There are limited spots in each of those, but we do offer them. And we've never hit full capacity. And we have people on them. So I just want to say there is a balance for us, but that is how we strive to bring our services to as many people as possible. And I think that was it. Covered by benefits, equity pricing, self-referral.
We do in-person or virtual.
Thank you. And our gals that work with us, Janine, Melanie, Jennifer, you can also find out all about them on our website. Our YouTube has video introductions from all of us. Actually, Jennifer's is coming tomorrow. And but you can read all about us on the website, and you reach them the same way by emailing off the website or calling or texting Angie and I. And you can get in touch with them as well for any other whole self-health therapeutic needs. Anybody that's here with us tonight, do you have any final questions for us before we peace out for the night? I feel like next time I need to have some like music just to like, I want to like do 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 like Jeopardy, but not. And yeah, you're so welcome. We just got to thanks for all the info, much appreciated. I don't know why you can't see it, but I can see it. And so you're so welcome. And so thank you to those who came online with us tonight, who bravely asked their questions or sat back and soaked up all the information. Thanks to those of you who will log on and watch this recorded version, and just know whether you're live with us tonight or you've watching the video and you got questions, reach out to us. Nourishyourtrueself.ca is the easiest, because that's where you can find our email, our phone numbers, and all the links to our social media. So I'm Jenny Lee, the social work half of this duo.
I'm Angie, the dietitian half.
And we are super stoked that you were here with us tonight. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you again soon.